Esmu Friedrichs Ebert-Stiftung, esmu Brīvības un Solidaritātes fonda vadītājs. Šodien moderēšu vai vadīšu diskusiju. Ņemot vērā, ka mūsu viesis no Latvijas diskusija būs angļu valodā. Ja gadījumā valodas jūs īpaši mēs pēc tam jums varam Hello everybody, I'm Eric Ansis. I'm part of the Freedom and Solidarities Foundation. I will be in charge of moderating this discussion. This is our fourth discussion in cooperation with Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung and the last one this year, which I hope next year we will continue. And I would like to, before we start discussion, to give floor to Tobias Marshall. Say something.
Well, I'm going to speak in English as the discussion is also in English. I hope you It's a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation. My name is Tobias Marshall. I'm head of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation here in Riga. As many of everybody of you knows what the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung is and who we are, along a couple of words about the foundation and why we are doing this discussion together with the Brīvības Solidaritātes funds. The Friedrich Ebert Foundation is a political foundation. It's the oldest German political foundation. It was founded in 1925 and is named after Friedrich Ebert, who was the first democratically elected head of state in Germany. He was a social democrat, and being the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, we are the foundation of social democracy in Germany and worldwide because we have offices in 110 countries. So we're not just working here in Riga and all the other Baltic states, but in 110 other countries. Our key issues, our key concerns are, on the one hand, giving scholarships to talented, to gifted young students, promoting democracy and civil society, and that's the reason why we are here, fostering international understanding and cooperation. And in this regard, a central concern of our work is to strengthen Europe and the European cohesion. As we all know, the European Union has always been a guarantee for peace, democracy, and prosperity for its member states. But in the last 10 years, these last 10 years has more been characterized less by successes than by crisis. We had the financial crisis, we had the economic crisis, then we had the Euro crisis, then we had the Greek crisis, then arrived the Ukraine crisis and the refugee crisis, then we had all this kind of crisis. Then we had the authoritarian tendency in some Eastern European states. We had the decision of Great Britain to leave the European Union, and we have anti-EU tendency in almost all member states, which are manifested in a broad support for populist right-wing parties all over Europe, also now in Germany. Maybe all of you have heard about the last general election in Germany where a right-wing populist party gained more than 12% and now is part of parliament. Despite all these crises and all the other things I mentioned, there are also some grounds for hope. As a consequence of the Brexit, a majority now advocate a tighter cooperation among the remaining member states. That is good news. And in all countries at present, significantly more citizens are convinced that the EU membership is positive for the country. That's also good news. Membership in the EU community is today being viewed once again more an opportunity than a risk. And many reform options of the EU are discussed at the moment. We all have read and heard about the papers by Juncker, by Tusk, by Macron, maybe in the future also by Merkel, who knows, we will see. This evening we are going to discuss the possible future scenarios for the European Union, and thereby, as the title of our discussion said, differentiating between wishful thinking and also realistic options. Two other key questions would certainly be, what is the Latvian perspective on the future of Europe, and what is a social democratic perspective on the future of Europe? And I'm very happy that we're going to organize, as Erwin's already said, this discussion together with the Freedom and Solidarity Fund. I want to thank you personally, Erwin's, and also the Freedom and Solidarity Fund for the other discussions we organized in the last couple of weeks, in the last 2 months. I want to thank our panelists for coming. I want to thank you for coming as well, and I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion, and Erwin, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Today we have not only very good panelists, but also audience, several political science members of parliament and so on. But before we jump into more serious issues, probably you could introduce yourself and tell what European Union is in your life. We'll start with Maris Graudiņš.
Well, you've heard my name, Maris Graudiņš. I'm a former member of the Latvian Parliament back in the early 90s. Before that, I was a Baltic political activist in the West during the days of the occupied Baltic, and subsequently was a communications expert, and now back into politics as chairman of the Progressive Party, founded earlier this year. For me, the European Union has been a shining light. We have a poet whose ideas have motivated many of the people in our political party, Ansis, who said, let me try to translate into English, it doesn't work so well occasionally, quietly place our hands on the flag of Latvia, create yourself, develop in the community of free nations back in the early 20th century. And that has been an inspiration to me. I believe that Latvia as topi auci brīvā Latve, brīvo tautu kopībā. That has always been an inspiration to me, that we as a small country, but as a state in a community of equals, democratic states, can reach new goals and attain stability in the European community.
Yeah, my name is Björn. Sorry, I wanted
No, please.
Yeah, my name is Björn. I'm living and working in Berlin. I'm the professor of economic policy, and I was studying in several countries in Europe, and so working for the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung in Berlin for some time, always on these European issues. So what is Europe for me? Europe is for me a chance to really not only get together and having the same European heritage we have, but also to shape globalization, for example, to shape things which might be things we fear, globalization, digitalization, the society, and I think Europe is one big chance to shape these things, and I think it's a unique chance we have to take.
My name is Ansis, Bogustovs. I work for TV24 here in Latvia. I have one weekly international affairs more discussion program, but I also have a daily top 5, which is political affairs, commenting on top 5 issues of every single day, working day here in Latvia. But to me, Europe started in a way when I wanted to be a journalist abroad, and firstly I decided to go to Moscow. Nevertheless, after that decision, 8 years all in all, I spent later in Brussels, and I was lucky to see the history of my country, really, because I started in 2000 my mission in Brussels, and it was when we started actually the real accession negotiations of my country. So that was partly a miracle, and I wish that in 10 years we will be a society of, let's say it like a Slovenia of today, more hoping to be a net payer than a net receiver. So I think for up until now, almost 15 years, we've been like net receivers, which definitely defines our logic in European Union. So I'd like my country to see this different logic from the perspective of a decision maker, like Germans do now for almost half
And
a
the problem is
century.
starting, you know.
Yeah, I know. No one wants to spend extra money for this, but I very much like if we can manage this one day. Hopefully, in nearest future. We will, yes.
In social media, I don't remember who was the author, but described that who is Latvians. And Latvians are quite provincial persons who generally are very afraid what will happen. Because, as Tobias mentioned, one crisis in Europe, second migration, Greece, and so on and so on. Until this moment, it was feeling that European leaders are not giving any roadmap or suggestions where to go. And each election is closer and closer to some kind of, let's say, danger. Probably you could comment from your expertise why it happened so that it was so slow, this process, only probably now starting some proposals. And which direction is more realistic to go?
You start. You're political science.
I wouldn't actually say we don't have enough roadmaps. I have not seen enough roadmaps in the last years. I've read a lot of these roadmaps and blueprints and plans for the future of Europe. So I think it's not only something which needs to come now or is popping up now at the end of a whole series of crises. I think already, well, with the beginning of the Euro crisis in 2010, 2011, the first roadmaps have been made, but they have been never discussed. Most of them, many of them. Not discussed because there were some member states, for example Germany, who didn't want to discuss some of these plans and discuss, for example, the future of the euro. And therefore they took this from the agenda. And as you said, with every election, we have seen this fear that, like Tobias Merschel mentioned, that right-wing populists entered not only parliament, sometimes even the government, and said, okay, why should this just be a progressive story? Europe could be rolled back as well. And this is now the critical point where I think political leaders have to understand that we do not need another roadmap and another roadmap which is not discussed, but I think we really need to focus on the main problems. And I think one of the main problems in the last year has been that we haven't really gone to the core of the problems. We just were talking about institutions. If I take the Eurozone, for example, they're discussing since a few years, let's have a European finance minister. I don't think that people really dare about the European finance minister. Someone who is there and has an institution of power without power in the end, because it's still the ECOFIN Council who is deciding on these things. And I think this creates an atmosphere where people think, okay, these new institutional things like a finance minister and these roadmaps, this is not real, this is not progress, and Europe is not capable of finding the real solutions. And I think therefore we have to dig deeper, come into the problems. And I think most of the problems of the last 10 years show that we have a problem of transnational solidarity to cope with these crises. In the Eurozone, because we have a common currency, but not a common fiscal policy. If I talk about migration, for example, the same. We have Schengen, free movement of people. We have the single market. But we forgot in the last years to care for a common border control, for a common asylum and migration policy. And these are the problems. But of course, these are bold problems which go then beyond the sovereignty of the national state. And this is a problem that we have to face now.
Ansis, you a long-time journalist and you interviewing politicians, but also, let's say, regular people. How do you think politicians, are they out of touch
No, not
with
at
society,
all.
or they...
I think they just are very bad in the sense of explaining why they are taking this or other decision. Not at all. I think they are
PR.
Yes, bad PRists. Yes, in the sense that there is no this brave decision, like they kind of. I don't know why. At least I can talk about Latvian politicians being not brave enough to take hard, strict, but positions that they can defend and explain why they are taking these positions. For example, these 5 scenarios proposed by Jean-Claude Juncker, I think it was almost a year ago. We discussed it, was it a year ago? I think, yes.
This in spring. Yeah, in spring, May.
This year,
Yeah, this
was
year.
it?
Yeah.
But we never had so far any decision beside 2 or 3, and by the way, behind closed doors, high-ranking discussions so far. I think even it was also in this very castle, it was a month or something ago, when first in my lifetime I saw my political elite of my country sitting for really 8 hours, president and prime minister. They, switched off their mobile phones and they started to think this question, which was, let's say, many at least political scientists and someone started to ask, well, come on, do you have a position at all? So we are lacking whatever taking stands. This is what I would accuse my government. But then in a larger picture, I think there is also this lack of, let's say, mistrust because of reality of Polish government, of Hungarian government, and differences amongst member countries, and then everyone looks sorry to Angela Merkel, that she should be, the strong woman that takes all of these kids together and let's start negotiating, don't be angry to each another. And there is this lack of someone, let's say, as powerful as maybe Angela would become with her next government, if it's the case, then really to start the job of decision making. Because I just remember in 2002 or 3 maybe, there was this convent of creation of European Constitution. And that was a problem with, let's say, the form that the incoming member countries, being called Young Europe or something, New Europe, were not fully accepted in this debate sincerely. And there was this, sorry to say for these who like French attitude, but this avant-garde attitude of Giscard d'Estaing, the previous French president, and also the acting president, Jacques Chirac, was very rude to New Europe. Now I think the New Europe, if it's called like this, also has their own minds, different opinions than typical Western European central-centric something, and they are not fully accepted. They are still as newcomers. So I think the West should also understand that, unfortunately, but there is 1/3 from these inhabitants of European Union living in Eastern Europe in different perspective. Their own economy grows quite well after a crisis. They become stronger and stronger. Yes, sometimes they have stronger and stronger opinions against different things than they went so far. And one should accommodate this, one should accept, one should listen to these, whatever, be it rude or not nice, not politically correct opinions, like a Hungarian Prime Minister is doing, not only thinking. But I think we should really talk more in between countries, and of course let's take 5 scenarios, let them discuss more and more. I really miss occasions like these, but in a European level, when the sincere discussions come in picture.
Tobias, will you hear?
Yeah, thank you, Tobias, for do it at European level, please.
Mari, you work a long time in connecting with European Parliament. Parliament is a place where to discuss things. It's democratically elected, and there's discussion to broaden its functions. but at the same time, more democracy can bring more populists, and then they can discuss not about solving problems, but about problems and more problems, and then you are in the middle of talks only about the problems but not solutions. How's your evaluation of
Well,
this democracy?
yes, we have populists, and they're going to be more on the extreme left and on the extreme right, but I don't think, I'm certain that there won't be enough on the fringes in order to impact the center-left, center-right establishment that is running and moving the European Union forward. And in fact, these voices from the fringes, I'm an optimist, I believe, are going to spur a move toward greater unification, toward perhaps it's going to be an enhanced cooperation to track Europe, but I'm optimistic that political considerations now after Brexit will give pause for people to think and to move things forward more quickly. I think we're seeing that now. It's difficult to keep track of all the roadmaps. I agree with my colleague. Juncker had his white paper, he had a State of the Union, 6 scenarios and everything. We need these visions. Our colleague, Social Democrat Franz Timmermans, has mentioned that the elites can't do it alone. We need the support of the people. But let me give you one paradoxical example for my optimism. When the economic crisis struck 7, 8 years ago, our former finance minister, a prominent member of the Transportation Committee in the Parliament, Robert Zīle, had always said that, no, they don't want a stronger Europe. They want things to remain the same. Latvians must protect our sovereignty. But when the financial crisis struck, Robert Zīle was on the front line saying we need a stability mechanism in Europe. We need to let Brussels control Latvia's budget, which I wasn't a big fan of at that time. And he was on the front lines for more centralization. And events are going to move us further in this direction, I'm sure, especially after Brexit. And you mentioned Poland, Viktor Orban in Hungary. Let me mention something in quite simple, banal language. The Polish government is not stupid, nor is Viktor Orban. He has mentioned sometimes that in the final analysis, they know where the money is coming from. Poland is the greatest net recipient in the European Union, and when push comes to shove, I think they will also support greater cooperation at the European level, as long as they can do their little nationalistic things in the country.
Sometimes people come or states together if there's huge crisis or war, and then establish some network of cooperation, and this is the case of the European Union. And now there's a lot of crisis that Europe become not more united but less, as you said, lack of solidarity. Do you see that there's chance for more Europe, not less, as it seems now?
Of course, I would say, and I would agree with my colleague on the right, because the crisis could be a chance. The crisis could be a chance and to find out what is missing in the moment. And like I said, we started some integration policies in the European Union, but we missed to really complement them. Monetary union was started as an idea, but now we realize in the crisis it's not enough to have a central bank. We need more cooperation. We need more common rules, for example. We need.
Yeah, but Great Britain didn't wait for that.
Sorry?
Great Britain didn't wait.
Yeah, the first are leaving. That's true. Yeah, and this is one danger, of course, that we're not quick enough to come to the decisions we need to take. The same with the migration crisis, because the migration crisis has shown a deep division, a new division between East and Western countries. Not between all of them, of course, but like you were mentioning Viktor Orban, he said, okay, close borders, together with Austria in the end, and many states in the Balkan, and this is a problem, of course. If you open up a policy like Schengen, like single market, and you're not foreseeing what other policies you need to integrate, where else you need to cooperate that these policies can be successful. And therefore, I think this needs to be discussed now. If it's in a roadmap or not, I think these scenarios, it was a beautiful idea. It was a kind of a game for enlarging discussion, and it's a pity if discussions, like you said, here, and because the European Commission, Juncker is saying, oh, we had so many discussions in all the member states. Yeah? All the commissioners were traveling to all the member states and doing discussions on the future of Europe. I think this is important, but nevertheless, we need to come at one point to decisions. And I think one elephant in the room is Germany, and Germany has to decide on some things. And I'm afraid that to talk about my country, but Angela Merkel was not helpful in many respects in the last years.
But having her as an elephant, that doesn't excuse us as, let's say, small mouses observing what elephant will finally decide, but actually doing nothing. And I hate this principle of my country, that this should be, at the end, a very elite decision. The Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs would take this as a decision. And it should be openly discussed, explained, by the way, what does it mean? Because if we ask the lady on this street here passing by, what does this mean for Europe to be a more federal or more different, what was these funny names of these different scenarios, she would have no clue, right? So the first thing is to explain and then to decide. So we should more go to this in real sense, more democratical.
Yeah, when I said more Europe, you shake your head.
Yes.
What could be? I think we have 4 or 5 years till next German and French elections. Time. What could be that more Europe, which could convince French and German voters that
French and German voters.
They already voted.
Well, at least I think I'm happy with what happened so far, and more of energy policy that is, let's say, commonly regulated by Brussels. This definitely gave to my country more, let's say, liberal market of electricity and gas. Already gives these many opportunities to local business here to make a decision and to lower the price of energy here. If you compare by income and what they pay for energy so far. So this is, I think, very good news up until now. I'm not happy with the new idea, probably will come up in a few months, of this second or even third attempt of defense policy that is so much now pushed by German and French. Maybe we misunderstood it at first, what is it going to be, but for our state budget that will be just almost double spending, right? So people, at least those who were skeptics, they made these points. This is of course too much. For us even 2% from the national GDP was already like, woo, what an achievement for next year's budget. So I think that might be one of these things where we will not become, of course, Orbanists and trying to slow it down, but at least not being happy. But at the end, we will definitely do everything that's possible to be just in a center of these 2 or 3 speed Europes, which is, and if it is going to be created. We will definitely, our position is always to be inside, and I definitely agree with this. I think for a small country positioned here, where we are positioned in the north, but actually next to big Russia, this is a great choice to be as active European as possible in any aspect.
Mari, what could be more Europe?
Well, we've already started talking about a few sectors, and I think it's useful to take a look at each sector individually. Ansis mentioned the defense sector, and certainly I was disappointed that our European Parliament member Artis Pabriks from Vienotība was against a European defense headquarters. And I think sometimes our politicians don't seem to realize the long-term interests of our country. We can't always rely upon Donald Trump and United States symbolic forces that we have here now in Latvia. Similarly, defense, similarly financial transaction tax, for instance. unusually enough, something that would give the European Union a stable foundation basis. Our politicians have not been at the forefront to encourage Europe to move in this direction. And since we spoke about elephants, it's not only Germany that is the elephant, but the large issue elephant, which I don't think will be resolved in the next 5 years, we can move in that direction, is the mutualization of debt and a closer cooperation in fiscal policy. 80% of the legislation in European Union countries is now made in Brussels. We're extremely integrated on the legislative side, but with only 1% of money going through the European Brussels budget, we're not very integrated financially yet. Financial transaction tax, even as an enhanced cooperation measure, I think would be a big step. And of course, mutualization of debt, we have to look at the negative side of Germany violating European Union standards with export imbalances. And sometime down the road, Germans, whether prodded by France and Macron, or will themselves realize that all of these things, the financial aspects, need to be resolved in a complex European Union fashion.
About defense, just a remark. If, my opinion, it can work if Germany not double but even more times their defense budget, and probably the Germans wouldn't be very happy about that, or would they?
Possibly. I want to go actually one step back, because I think before we go into detail, we have to answer one question. I think this is really at the center of discussing the future of Europe. And this question is, where is nowadays in this integrated Europe really the sovereignty of a state to tackle challenges of the future? And I think this is something we can see what Macron has done. He opened up this whole idea saying the sovereignty is not anymore in the hands of the traditional national state with regard to migration, with regard to climate change, with regard to energy policy, with regard to defense, to fiscal issues in the monetary union, because the common currency is a common good in Europe, and so many other things. And I think this is the most important thing to realize. And in Germany, not everyone has already learned this lesson, maybe because Germany is the elephant, or is a big country, sovereign country. Yeah? But nevertheless, these transnational problems, we cannot tackle alone. No European state can tackle them alone. If everyone agrees that we need to tackle them together, then of course we have to do the next step and talk about all those single points. And what Macron did in his famous speech there in Paris is saying, okay, he was quite shy actually regarding the expectations on the topic of monetary union and fiscal unification. Okay, he said we need a common budget, a Eurozone parliament, maybe a finance minister, but he was more talking about all the other issues. Common university network, he was talking about migration policy, defense policy, what you said, energy policy, and many other things. But if you want to go there really, you need to accept that it's not anymore the nation state, it's more. And then you have to legitimize these things. And it means, in the end, that you have to change the system a bit. It cannot be anymore the council, or just the council who is deciding. It needs to be the European Parliament, who needs to have a big say on these issues. And this means then, in the end, to change it at the game, like we're doing it now. Macron is now proposing we should have talks about Europe and transnational voting lists for the European Parliament. We can do all this, but in the end we have to talk about the treaties as well. And I think this will be really hard work. And in Germany, I can tell you, politicians are, no matter which party, are not at this point to accept that their own country's sovereignty is going more and more towards Europe. And it's interesting that the French president is doing, because normally it was the French who said, well, the Europe of de Gaulle is Europe de Patrie, Europe of the nation states, and he skips that now. And this is interesting. And I hope that other states take this hand and say, okay, let's go into this direction. But we have to change the treaties then in the end. And nobody wants to talk about this. I don't know if it's if here people talk about treaty changes or not.
No, they don't speak about this, but I think what they also didn't mention, and I'd like to put here a kind of very interesting note. I noticed just recently that now the willingness to talk, if not create, but to talk about possible social dimension in Europe is actually proposed by Western Europeans. That was always a question for us, let's say 10 years ago, and that was never oh no, we are not going to do it because we are not going to do it. Social affairs, it's a member country's issue. And now when Macron and even more people propose, okay, we should differently regulate it differently, this posted workers directive and things like this, it was like, wow, can I believe it? Really? They were, 10 years ago, they were scaring their own local people with a Polish plumber. If you remember, if people know what is a Polish plumber, the guy who was very sexy but actually was kind of threatening French local jobs. And now they are like, oh, can we renegotiate it? Can we regulate it differently? I was like, wow, what a nice change in my own lifetime, and just in a very small detail. I think this definitely brings more Europe into this if the willingness is sincere. I understand that French willingness is not sincere from our points of interest, is just a typical French solution they want to get in this. But if that will open even more social Europe, then it's an automatic creation of the United States of Europe, at least for me, because then if that very, let's say, if not country, then the Union has social policy partly regulated by Brussels, then it's almost like United States of America. I don't know.
Yes, thank you, Ansis, for opening up a new sector, as I encourage. Let me show you an old headline. I have an old-fashioned habit of pulling things out for my students at the Stockholm School of Economics. And here the headline is, Latvian candidates to the Euro Parliament, Euro bluff. In other words, they're talking nonsense. And there's an entire list of areas where European Parliament MEPs do not make decisions. Actually, practically all of them are wrong. They can make decisions, and I, as a former official of the European Parliament, will go as far as to say that the European Parliament can practically make any decisions it wants. It's a bona fide parliament in that sense. It can't do it without having the political clout to get the council to support it, of course. And especially in the social sphere, it's precisely the Progressive Alliance of Social Democrats that has been on the forefront of having internal discussions. First of all, it's not on the political horizon yet, but a formula for a European Union minimum wage. A formula, not a standard amount, but for a European Union pension. And our Latvian media always say, no, you can't do that, the European Treaty doesn't allow it. It does. I was looking for the specific article number and I couldn't find it right now before our discussion, but the European Union does allow for it. There are general interest clauses that allow for adopting social policies and for having even a two-track enhanced Europe in this regard. So I completely agree with you. Yes, social policy can be one of the foundations for bringing Europe closer together, and a key for having the, I'm speaking Eurobarometer language, those who have difficulties paying their bills often and sometimes, for having these people trust more in the European Union also, because this is a stumbling block right now. They don't trust anybody, they don't trust our local government, but nor do they trust the European Union as much as we would like for these changes to move forward. The social policy changes would bring these people on board to a future Europe.
And if I may add, if Social Democrats are not doing or going into this direction of a sort of European regulation of social affairs, and it's the nationalist forces who are doing it. Because they say, okay, the established parties, they are just saying this China principle, there is no alternative, we have to carry on with the market, no social affairs. And then came the populists, the right-wing populists normally, saying, yes, there is an alternative. And we help you. We do social affairs, but only in the old-fashioned national sense. And this is this is exactly what is happening in Poland and many other states. Or look at the program of Marine Le Pen in France.
Yeah.
It was the same, actually. It was social affairs, yeah, social policies, but in a pure national sense, of course. And so the progressive idea must be European, of course. And I think, yeah, there are ideas, and there are ideas, there are ideas on the table. But still, it was also Germany who was afraid of it. I have to say, also the German trade unions, for example. The German trade unions, for example, fear something like the European unemployment insurance. Because they say, no, this is our unemployment insurance, and we want to have a say in it. And we fear that...
Quick question, will the German constitution prohibit some of this European integration?
Depends how far it goes. The Bundesverfassungsgericht, the Constitutional Court, has said you can go along with this integration, and in 2009 this ruling was, but at a certain point, that too much money is spent from the federal state, then you have to decide to give up this constitution and to enter a European federal state. But of course, the Constitutional Court has not said when exactly this time is. I wouldn't say it's, for example, with unemployment insurance or with Euro bonds, for example, or other proposals on the table. And it's not with social indicators, for example, or a corridor for minimum wages, or a corridor for taxes or stuff like that. I think we can do this because it's only framework regulation, which is not hurting the sovereignty of the state. But of course, if we move more and more into this direction, this question will come to the table as well. And I know that in Brussels, many are waiting for the next rulings of the Constitutional Court in Germany. Is it allowed or is it not allowed?
What do you think about several speed Europe? Some of media present something as a new idea, but actually it's already all the time happening in Eurozone, Schengen, and so on.
I don't know. I think it's reality already. It exists. One should never pretend that it will be different amongst 28. Just imagine, if you would have 28 good friends, do you really sincerely have all 28 of them the best friends ever? Or still you would have 3 bests and then 6 more like kind of bests, and then, you know, you would always have, and that's the same with your neighbors or something. I think it's logical. I'm just fearing a little bit of starting to find more divisions than these combinations of different speeds in different areas. I'm not quite sure if it's like sounds very nice. Oh yes, let's find a Nordic Europe. Let's be Baltic and Nordic together, and that's the solution for us. Even if Brits go, okay, let them go. Maybe Greeks should be kicked off, but then we are still Nordics or something. This, I think, it's bad behavior to start to find divisions more and but still, I think I probably said already that I think that the national interests of Latvia definitely are to try to be as close to the first group if we are accepted. But so far, if you take any other small reality, Euro, different, I don't know, the army issue, if it's an army, or Schengen, we are everywhere almost. So we are, if not fully accepted as a deciding partner there, then at least a very active small neighbor or small someone as a member country who is there. So for me, I wouldn't be afraid as a Latvian citizen. I would be more afraid of as a Hungarian citizen or I don't know, even Polish citizen for creation of these two-speed Europes. This definitely scares me.
But I think more so as a Greek or Cypriot or Portuguese or Spanish citizen, perhaps more so, because I think it's the north-south divide that needs to be overcome right now. All of the public opinion surveys show these people are the most distrustful of the European Union. In Cyprus, Greece, they perceive themselves as being sacrificial lambs to German fiscal conservative policies, whatever. So it's this emotional, how should I say, canyon that needs to be breached and overcome. And I think that's a key. We don't want it to recreate the Hanseatic League in the 21st century. So.
I think it's not only ideological canyon. I think there's a real divide, because if you look, for example, at the figures of unemployment, they are still too high in Greece and Spain. Over 20% youth unemployment, 46% still in Spain. The last generation, this is a topic. Europe was also the idea of catching up, and the southern states, they catched up, and then came the crisis. And since the crisis, we don't have, we changed from convergence to divergence, one can say, and this creates these deep divides. To your question, I'm a fan of this kind of core integration avant-garde, which is doing a step further, because I totally agree. I don't think that with 28 or soon 27 we can really do the step forward we would need. Nevertheless, I think we have to discuss what kind of differentiation we want. I don't want to have a closed shop, because some think this should be a closed shop. Only some states, for example, the northern states, they are for the Eurozone, and they don't have to spend any more credit lines to the southern states because they are doing their own thing. I don't think this will work, because it's totally against the European idea of transnational solidarity. So I think this idea of an avant-garde, which is doing one step further, but keeps the door open for everyone who wants to join. I think this, others call it concentric circles. So we have several circles in Europe. This idea, I think, has a lot of future, and I think we have to go there. Because the other side is we're waiting until the last member state is convinced to do the next step. We cannot wait.
Of course.
Because we're waiting too long. After the convention failed in 2005 in France and in the Netherlands, we have, of course, the Treaty of Lisbon. But after that, we didn't have any big progress. We entered the crisis, and of course, we had this European semester and Lisbon agenda and stuff like that. But it was more coordination. A lot of paper was written, and many things were good, but it was not the big progress we need. And again, back to Germany, maybe for one thing, because we were mentioning Macron very often here in this round this evening. Something like that a politician is really talking for 2 hours about Europe. I would love to hear that in Germany. You don't have that in Germany. I think the last big European speech was the former Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer in the year 2000. We have many politicians talk about Europe, but not in the sense having a utopian idea, with the idea laying some grounds for the discussion where we want to go. And I think this is important. I don't know. As you said, I think you don't.
I think Latvians are more pragmatic, let's say German-style, quadratisch, praktisch, gunstig, and so on. The French would always go with great ideas, still keeping in mind that maybe 5% out of these ideas are, realized if they are realized that, sorry to say, paid by Germans. So sometimes this sounds like, why should we now pose idea that, we are not the owners at the end of this idea. We are not kind of going to pay for this. So yes, I would agree that maybe sometimes we as a small nation are lacking this ambition for Europe, and probably I'm not sure if Latvians would switch off or on TV set if there is someone giving a speech for 2 hours in television about Europe. But still, I would agree that if he is a very charismatic leader, for me at least, he would more, at least what I would propose him to do, is to talk and explain more of solidarity, the thing that is mentioned in this the core of this very foundation here. Because I think for us, this is one of the issues we should explain more to people. What does it mean, solidarity, from the point of view of Europe? Then one day we would be more, accepted in this very corn of Europe, the first gear, if it exists, or more forceful one. because this is one of the problems why I think we will be not fully regarded as you know, these visionists and these front runners of something, because of our behavior so far. It was like low performance. So this.
Can we still discuss about Juncker's proposals, or it is already out of date and it should be renewed? How do you think?
The scenario plan.
Yeah.
No, of course. I mean, he himself, in his speech of the Union, said, "Now enough is these 5 scenarios. I have my 6th scenario," and he like ended the debate because it's my scenario we need to talk about, which was a very personal speech, by the way, he gave there in the European Parliament. But nevertheless, I think the idea is good to discuss these scenarios because it's so easy. I mean, scenarios is no. It's not a research tool. It's an idea to boost the discussion because you can decide where you want to go. And I think it's very easy. The Commission did it very right to map there's one way forward, of course, 2 way forwards. First is all the future 27 member states together. A lot of more integration, then a small group of integration, you just discussed that, core Europe. And then there's a rollback, of course. Like nationalists want roll back Europe and have less Europe. The Commission had, of course, another kind of rollback scenario, which was only the single market. So skip all the other things, do only this. I don't think it would work. And then it's, of course, the modeling through scenario. I call it the modeling through scenario. And this is, others call it step-by-step approach. I would say there's a difference between those two, because step-by-step integration is this what we call old-fashioned méthodologie, integration when it's necessary. And the modeling through approach is the one we have seen in the last 10 years. So when there was a crisis, the leaders met in Brussels and decided, we need an ESM, we need a fiscal compact, we need a Euro Plus pact, we need this and that. And I think, in these 10 years, we lost many, many, many people who said, where do you want to go in the end? What is the goal? And many politicians, national politicians, they couldn't say. If you ask members of the Bundestag, if you ask members of the Assemblée Nationale or in other countries, politicians say, we like to solve the crisis, but are we going towards a fiscal union, towards a stability union, towards core Europe, or do we just carry on this modeling through? And I think this last one is something what people do not want. And therefore, this scenario exercise is quite good to discuss maybe where we want to go.
Yes, referring to one specific again of Juncker's State of the Union speech, I agree with you. It's quite clear that muddling through the status quo isn't going to be enough. So inevitably, either we go one direction or the reverse direction, it's going to have to be forward. But one aspect of Juncker's speech also was that he mentioned the fact that we do have an increasingly stronger banking union, and we have pooled our resources to help failing banks, key banks across the European Union. But with increasing labor mobility, we haven't done anything at the European Union level to have a labor agency at a pan-European level, and that was one of his proposals as well. So I think when we come back to these social welfare, social issues, that these are some of the keys, as we spoke about before, about moving forward, integrating our efforts to regulate and protect workers at the European Union level, that will bring people closer together. And again, referring to those most skeptical of European Union integration, who would actually benefit by it most, I think, but are most skeptical are the lower income people right now. So we need more social Europe, as Juncker announced.
Migration. Well, how do you think the European Union future should tackle? Because I think migration is most dangerous for the European Union than poverty, unfortunately, or social issues. As we see that people are mobilizing, voting for populists because of the migration issue.
but in the same time,
Of course, it's influencing each other.
yes, but in the same time, I think one of the things, at least for me, what I learned, I should never allow my politicians to do this, let's say, double standard game, that we are in the same time paying to Greece to shut up their doors, and that's our way of solving problems. This is also not sincere, honestly. Yes, we changed a lot even in Latvian politics. People were changing their sides even by taking very open-minded decisions, and then no, we better limit ourselves. But honestly, at least on the level of Latvia, I wouldn't say that this very much made any consequence in our politics. Besides, of course, the nationalistic party that was always against and is still against and is blaming these who never came, and
It's just a problem on public agenda, but it's not really happening.
It's
But in other
exactly.
states, it's happening.
Yeah, but this very much teaches us to be sincere in our solidarity, in our decisions of how we take it, on understanding that one should never solve the problem on just, again, taking the bill and paying another
That's
country.
each probably you, me, and somebody else, but the majority, if you look on how attitude is against refugees, how in the parliament
Just
all the
before
conservative thoughts are legislation made not to have them here. Sorry.
Just to give an example from Germany, many people who vote the new right-wing party who entered in the last elections, in the general elections of the German Bundestag, many people who voted for them, they said, well, we have the feeling that the government, or the last government, was caring for refugees, but was not caring for us. And so I think there's a connection between migration and social issues. Of course you can have migration and people do not fear that, because it's not only about cultural issue or cultural discussions. It is discussion also about social things. If you leave people alone and tell them there's an alternative, there's a market, and people in the middle class fear that they lose their jobs, they're of course looking for someone they can put their fears on and say, okay, but they're caring for the people who come new to our country. And we don't want this because nobody's caring for us. And so you have to do social policy if you want to do a migration policy.
Really, a social policy was falling down in France, and for example in Germany, that it's happened, as you're saying.
Also in Germany, we have in the last 15 years, a lot of reforms on the labor market, for example, where we have a lot of people, especially in the eastern part of Germany, who feel abandoned, who feel that nobody's caring for them, and they voted for this new right-wing party because they promised, okay, we close the borders and then we care for you because we have a social program. And this is a danger, and the same was true for France. Marine Le Pen said, I will care for you, and skip off Europe, skip off all the people coming to our country. And I think this is one of the main tasks for the established parties, or progressive parties, to realize that there's a connection between those two fields, migration and social effects.
2 or 3 points on this briefly. Number one, first of all, it should be crystal clear that it's our international obligation to accept people from war-torn areas who are refugees and their families. We know that the statistics on the migrants in Europe are a little bit different vis-a-vis whether or not these are bona fide refugees occasionally, but the obligation is crystal clear. Our members of the European Parliament were not so crystal clear on meeting these obligations, especially from the center-right Vienotība group, where all of them abstained from their political group's decision, and our two not so popular in the Latvian community members of the parliament, Mamikins and Ždanoka, supported the refugee quotas. So the political obligation is there to accept bona fide refugees. But secondly, I was head of the European Parliament Information Office for 8 years, and every year, as you know, Europe has the propagandistic, this is the year of of the social fight against poverty or whatever it is. I think this is the year of cultural diversity, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and next one is for heritage.
Okay,
Yes.
cultural diversity. And let me mention here the Latvian perspective, because when we speak about migration trends, and we will need migration in all countries, hopefully skilled migrants in order to resolve the question of an aging population. In the year of cultural diversity, we need to remember that diversity is important, and that when we speak about Latvia, Latvia represents cultural diversity as an entity. So our politicians do need to act and to be careful so that this Latvianness that we enjoy here in Latvia is not threatened. So it's interesting that we do also need to respect the rights of the majority. It's not simply the rights of the minority that need to be respected. And this is a difficult question. There are gray areas, and it's for wise politicians and in communication with the electorate, with citizens that need to resolve this particular issue. My heritage is also from Latvia's part of, from the region of Latgale, which has its own distinct language or dialect, depending on how you look at it. And it's also on the list of endangered languages in the European Union official list. So that needs to be protected, and Latvia needs to be protected, and we need to protect refugees. So how this mix is resolved is not so easy, but these are my thoughts.
So, more tackling social issues is one of the tools, but is there any other tools dealing with migration and reducing risks and fears in societies?
Maybe to be more decisive when it comes to foreign policy, even if it involves armies sometimes. There is Vladimir Putin taking decisions in Syria, not any European leader or Donald Trump. Well, maybe it's good that Donald Trump is not taking decisions.
Forces
Yeah.
on the ground?
Yeah, but well, I'm not saying forces on the ground, but being involved and being really, you know, discussing it on everyday's matters. Because so far we have just, you know, this is the flaw that comes in Europe because of the crisis, and we are not. We are just responding post factum. Not. I'm not playing the game as a kind of force or something, but still, in historical moments, I think we are like looking around the transatlantic ocean. Okay, there is a Trump, there is elections, pre-elections, or something that. I really, this is the nice aspect of a European defense policy, what I like for the future, that we might be more decisive when it comes to our interests. Because Putin now has this, let's say, core, he can open it and he can keep it, you know, you can, at least for me, it's like, wow, he can do it any day. He can make one more conflict and provoke 1 more million flowing into Germany in a few months. This is not decided. This is not solved, at least, not for me, at least.
But I would more think about development aid, for example, on a European level, which would help instead of military forces. But nevertheless, again, if you have a single market, if you have free movement of people, you also need to take care of a common border. Of course, there is a crystal clear, like I said, crystal clear obligation that refugees can enter. But the problem is bolder. It's not only about refugees who flee from war. It's also about migration out of economic reasons. And there, Europe has no clear policy, or had no clear policy in the last years. And I think we have to discuss this. Of course we need quotas. There's nothing else than that to, in the end, to let people here into the countries and have quotas where people want to go. I think this crisis of the last 2 years made very clear this Dublin system was a system, well, for time when the sun is shining, but not for the rain. And of course we need to change this now. But it's difficult because we have this East-West divide there, with many states in Eastern Europe who do not want that. Not talking about Latvia, we're talking about Poland, talking about Hungary.
Latvia don't want either, but they will agree what they're saying. Major countries. All right. Okay, is there comments and questions from the audience? Now it's the time you are also be involved in this. And I know Waco was...
My job is to talk in the parliament, but others talk.
and nobody's... Peter.
Okay, I have two remarks that are coming from the same source, namely in October and September I was organizing 5 discussions on Euroscepticism in Latvian towns and countryside, at least 2 hours away from Riga. And there I got for myself at least some interesting ideas on both migration crisis and then also the future of European Union as seen from people outside Riga. Regarding migration crisis, I would agree that probably in western part of Europe, social programs and saying to people that we control the common borders better than we did before would do the trick, probably. But when I was talking to people in Latvian countryside, it's quite clear that there are 2 sources of fear when they are thinking about migration. Source number 1, because they are not really afraid of every migrant that they encounter in their life. Source number 1 is the lack of exposure to the religion of Islam. Most of them had only heard about it on TV in a very negative context. And I think it's true not just for Latvia but the rest of Eastern Europe, because there is this very clear correlation. The less migrants there is in a country, the more there is fear. And Islam and the lack of exposure to this religion is one of the causes why people react in Eastern Europe in such a manner as they did. And I don't think that there is any other solution as a long-term exposure to peaceful Muslims in our own country. So that's number 1 cause of fear. Number 2 cause of fear is the unwillingness or again fear from for people coming from totally different cultural backgrounds. Almost no one in the Latvian countryside, for example, would fear somebody or would object to somebody coming from Ukraine or Moldova. But they would object from somebody coming from, for example, some African or a Middle Eastern country. Again, not because the people in Latvia are necessarily racist, it's because they have not really been exposed to different cultures, and it will change with time. We were talking with the people in Latvian countryside about their own experiences. When we're talking about specific people, their opinion tend to change. So I don't think there is a quick fix in Eastern Europe on this matter, except for long-term exposure to diversity in general. Number 2 observations that I wanted to make is regarding the future of Europe and how Europe is seen from something totally different depending on where you live, in the former or so-called eastern part of Europe or western part of Europe. I was showing to the audience in three discussions the scenario number 6 from Juncker's State of the Union speech. One discussion members had to read it. And one discussion did not really, it did not show them the speech. I just switched off the sound and I was telling them what is going on in the European Parliament. And you know, the people here in Latvia, and I'm sure it's also true elsewhere, do not really want to follow those sorts of discussions because they feel that they are not prepared to understand them. The only thing that they were shown was the scenario 6 was 7 to 8 minutes. It's because of translation problems, it's because of the lack of understanding of context. I don't think there is any other solution as some exposure to the issues having to do with Europe, future of European Union by local politicians. That would make them relevant, the future of Europe, in context of the issues here at home. Because when it comes to the issues regarding the future of European Union, the only good solution that I could find talking to people in different circumstances was switching off what politicians are saying altogether, politicians in Brussels, and together trying to looking at this arena where European Parliament gathers and where there are members from the European Commission as well, and showing them our representatives, for example, Valdis Dombrovskis as commissioners, and they themselves identified in the hall, in the audience, members of European Parliament elected in Latvia, and then we were trying to paint a picture of what are the main subject matters right now at stake at the European Union level, and they got me interested. But I don't think that such a case-by-case approach when we are talking to each person individually is sensible at the national level. So the last thing that I wanted to say, and that follows from this observation, is this lack of sense of empowerment that is very visible among Latvian population, but this is something that differentiates us a lot from, for example, Lithuanians. Lithuanians feel that they can influence things at European Union level, while whenever this issue emerged in Latvian discussions, people were, to say it mildly, very skeptical. And I think the only difference between Lithuania and Latvia regarding our influence on European Union level is whether our politicians are saying to us what they are doing there, not on small things, but as the president of Lithuania is doing, she's just appearing all the time with other leaders of European Union, she's saying what she's doing regarding Ukraine, and people tend to start to believe that they matter at European Union level. Again, this is not something that is universal throughout the principle European Union, it's very Latvia specific, but unless we give up on our population and politicians altogether, I would say the only way how we can meaningfully take part in this discussion is having politicians who are capable of making sense on European Union regarding local issues.
I can just
Like our president.
Yes, may. But can I add you that I noticed one phenomena. It is already, I think, 3 summits of European Union when my Prime Minister, it's no matter if I like him or not, is going to Brussels latest possible date and time, because he has no seat in these small summits of political groups that are assembling, like prime ministers of social democrats and prime ministers of EPP group would assemble in small areas before big European summit. Of course, not to make a kind of social democratic stand, but at least, you know, to talk and to. He has no affiliation to any political group. So even if you would follow your own country's only person in this European summit taking decision something, he can never explain to you what is my, you know, good friends here for a family photo. So we are a little bit apart from the sense of real political involvement. And the second observation is that the people in Latvia, if I would ask to any French young or old person, if you're leftist or rightist, let's simplify it, he can definitely understand what is the question about. I doubt that Latvians would what does it mean to be leftist? Is it good or bad? Why are you asking? Oh, you should be, you know, no, I'm not, you know, Neil Sushikovs or something like this. So this also comes in my mind when I speak, because one cannot affiliate yourself here in Latvia. Well, so that means one cannot affiliate with social democratic ideas, for example.
Yeah, I think this is a key point. This is one of the reasons why we founded our progressive party this year, because we feel that there has been very weak representation on the center-left from Latvia's side over the past 14 years in the EU, and it's precisely this inability to be represented. All the compromises in Europe are between the Social Democrats and the EPP.
So far.
And we have limited input into the one side of this formula. Plus, I think it's scandalous the language proficiency of some of our ministers in the European Union actually de facto prevents them from presenting our points of view in an adequate fashion. So that's the second part.
Very cool.
Ebert actually encouraged me to kind of conclude or to continue where she just finished, because all things equal, if you look at the Latvian specific situation, then and try to project it on the European level, we've heard it very often times that all these global issues, or in this case European issues, at the end they are the local issues. So how do you solve, how do you find the solution to the local matter, then you can project it to the higher level up. So therefore, what Eva just said, that she's also been very active in debate about Latin political parties. Let's be honest, Latin political parties are not really political parties in Western European sense. I mean, these are interest groups. These are very small oligarchic groups, if you want to call them, in a real sense of oligarchy as it is in political science. But without solving the matter of party financing, they will stay like this. So therefore, this is our domestic task here in Latvia. So without solving it, forget it. I mean, this system is going to continue to continue like that. But talking about the European scenarios and the European issues, you brought the issue of European treaties, and already for let's say last 8 years, started by the King Bogustovs Foundation, the number of European think tanks have been discussing the different scenarios for Europe. So therefore, question to you. They are, as you said correctly, they are the white paper, they are the scenarios of Macron, there was a vision of Joschka Fischer and Humboldt. Do you see that there is some external factor, or it's again, there should be a financial crisis which will really make the European powers to say, let's have an intergovernmental conference and let's change treaty?
Directly on that, I think there will be, we haven't talked about this, absolutely right, good question. I think there will be a lot of external factors. One is, of course, President Trump. Of course, Trump is one of the reasons why many European politicians who said, okay, let's see, modeling through to the next crisis, maybe doing now, say we have to speed up. Another external factor, it's kind of internal factor, but external as well, the next elections, for example, in Italy next year. If the anti-Euro Cinque Stelle is winning the elections, they want to get out of the Euro. Okay, let's see if that really will happen, but I feel the reaction of the financial markets, and then there might be the next crisis. Or if you think about global economic cycles, the uptrend, the American economy, the US state economy is now going since the last financial crisis. This is about 10 years now, 9 years, and it's for sure that in the next years there might be a downturn. And if this downturn is then coming to Europe, and our Eurozone is not yet fixed for the next big crisis, I think, because we are not at this point where we can say we have of course we have the stability, the European stability mechanism and other things, but we don't have yet the fiscal union model. And this could be external factors, of course. And even the banking union, because you were talking about the banking union. The third column of the banking union, the deposit guarantee, the European, is not there. Because of Germany, of course, but it's not there. And many other.
But is there a local debate? Sorry to interrupt you. Is there a local debate in Germany, please, that there could be, in case there are these external factors influencing that Germany would change its mind?
No, there's no such debate.
No such debate.
And the only debate in Germany, in this sense, future of Europe in the moment is we have to take the hand of Monsieur Macron, because he has invited us to discuss the future of Europe, and the discussion at the moment in Berlin is how far we want to go, or which topic we want to treat, but not the big treaty changes. In the end, I think for the Chancellor, she knows that in the next crisis she has to move a big leap forward. Actually, I would propose that she needs to do the step before the next crisis arrives.
But it's not in her nature to do that.
That's a point.
I'm so sorry, but I don't
Which
understand.
crisis you are speaking about?
What
Well, I mean, in Germany there's no crisis at all.
One by one.
It's the same.
Which crisis?
What's in the
Every
crisis?
third word is crisis. So which crisis? Where is the crisis? In Bavaria this week, the people who didn't have work is 2.7%. Okay, that's Bavaria. In Germany, I don't know the actual 10% maybe. And maybe these are the people who don't want to work. So where's the crisis? What crisis do you mean?
Maybe in Berlin, I don't know.
I don't know where the crisis is.
Okay.
I'm not talking
But
about
it's the
Germany.
migration crisis or it's the integration crisis?
No, we were talking about the future. The question when the next crisis, the next financial crisis, or the
next
next euro
crisis?
crisis might
Europe.
hit the European Union. This is the question. If the question was on external factors, and one external factor might be the next financial or economic crisis. Because the next crisis
We had
might.
today a talk with a firm who is working from Latvia and has
Lots of large.
wir haben riesengroße Bauprojekte in Deutschland. Und die wissen nicht, woher die ihre Arbeiter bekommen
I
sollen.
had to switch to English.
Yes, no problem. Es ist Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, deswegen sprechen wir alle.
Ja, aber dann
Nicht
alle
Yeah, but the discussion
No problem, no
in
problem.
English.
Yeah, the whole idea is actually, in Europe, it's 500 million inhabitants. You have to see this figure, 500 million. United States, 350 million.
There's
It's
Russian
nothing. Russia is 140
Yeah,
million.
Russian is a
It's
local-
nothing.
a
You see,
local force.
if we are speaking about the world, we have to speak, of course, about figures.
Yeah.
It's the power of geography. And in Europe, we have to speak about the power of geography always. There's Northern Europe and there is Southern Europe. And there will be always different between. And then there
And
is
then the difference is between Germany too. There's the northern
Northern
Germans
Germany and
the
southern
southern
Germany.
Germans.
It's a huge difference. You see, if you're speaking about word integration,
I don't get your point.
you'll get my point if you listen.
No, I mean, the last,
Yes.
you saying no more, there can't happen any crisis.
No,
anymore to Europe.
every day the whole world is living only with crisis. What we are doing every day is to be prepared for the next crisis. We have to have a vision, what we have to do, that's all.
Exactly.
And if everybody does his homework, everything is developing.
I would say.
Now, so you see, we have a framework in Europe, a very good framework. We have to work on stabilizing this framework. And all the experiments, remember Adenauer, be very careful with all experiments. And what Monsieur Macron is doing is another big experiment, because he's not doing his homework. That's the problem. That's why Marine Le Pen came. And it's very good that she was not able to get the power. It's a power of democracy. It's very, let's say,
Yeah,
more or less
but,
easy.
anyway, there are crises, but we are responding.
It's
There was
always-
a question.
A second place.
Sorry. We can move forward also to others.
I have one replica, just not a question, but well, I think many of these problems that you were talking about are stemming from, well, I can name 3 points which are all based on the lack of politicians. Well, those 3 points are lack of understanding in the following. First point is the lack of understanding of commonness. So there is no such problems that we have, that Lithuanians doesn't have, that Polish doesn't have, or that French doesn't have in the global sense. But we are striving to protect all our local interests, don't understanding that those the same interests are everywhere, and we are trying to divide when we can unite. Second thing is the lack of understanding in the differences. For example, we group people together like, oh, we hate all the migrants, oh, we hate all the Muslims. Well, on Muslim side, you can look at Bulgaria, which have greatest Muslim population in the European Union. They don't have such problems. But well, they have different historical ties and stuff. But well, we can look at them. We are grouping migrants together on all sorts of stuff. we don't speak usually in Latvia at least about smart migration. We are not talking about differences in groups of people, like whether they are economic migrants from, I don't know, from peaceful countries which were not obligated to like approve as a migrants in Latvia or in Europe, or like a different kind of migrants that are from war-torn territories of Syria and stuff like that. We don't differentiate, we just see alien, and that's all, that's our discussion. That's where our discussion is ending. And the third thing that we are lacking is the understanding of changes. So we're trying to solve our current problems, but that is too late. Our current problem solving is too late. We don't understand, crisis will come, I can guarantee, like 3 years or 4 years, there will be a new economic crisis in Europe. That is almost 100%. Well, we will have many technological changes. We will have many different changes on all fronts. But we are just right now trying to solve what's in front of us. And that is too late. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah,
We should always think about the future, yes.
Nobody thinks about it.
No, that would be a plea actually to look for the future. And to your comments, I don't think that our European institutions are in the moment good enough to weather the next storm.
It's a lack of discussion.
It's a
This
lesson
is what happened in Germany is only a lack of discussion.
And this is the point.
Problem of Germany.
You always speak by it too.
Sorry.
Yes, we are married 40 years or something like that.
No problem.
Very short.
You are talking about an elephant in the room. Elephant in the room means that people are not talking about this significant problem. The significant problem before the elections in Germany was Angela Merkel. She is not an elephant, but she did not talk about, she talked not about the problem, which was very important, and therefore the AfD has the 40 whatever percent, and they will be more because she did not talk about this problem, which was the problem
The
with immigration.
The migration problem.
Yes, and this is the elephant in the room in Germany. In the last election.
Because there is no.
Sorry, yeah, I
The
understand.
German problem wanted to talk about. The question was about the next European problem. And
The next European problem will be if Germany has no government. That will be the next problem.
Yeah, sorry.
Definitely will have.
If there's no government at any state, there will be a problem somehow. Yeah, there was a
So I have two questions and just small short story. Speaking about how bad is the English of, the foreign languages of Latvian politicians, don't worry, I come from Italy. You are amazing. And the perception of Europe. So I've been living in different European countries, and I came here with my background idea as an Italian. So in Italy we say Europe is the place where it's cold, people are tall and blonde and they work hard. then I came here and people said, that's not Europe. And, hey, no, this is Europe. I'm telling you. I've been believing all my life that Europe was like tall people, cold, work hard, and then no. So that's always a perception. Is everywhere you go, no, it's not Europe. Right? Of course it is.
Unity in diversity.
Exactly. About also the Latvian political parties, I had the luck to be able to vote for the European election in Germany and for the local election here in Riga.
Oh, really? You did?
Oh, yeah.
Wow, thank you.
And I can say that the political parties here don't fit any box.
Exactly.
From my
Even from Italians.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even from Italian, which shows.
No, but I would say that this is because we have a different a different political history. Also for the elections in Latvia, you don't have to defend a social democratic party failing. In Italy we do, in Germany we do, in France we did, in Holland look the disaster. And Yeah, and then finally the question, sorry for these small stories, about the migration. What do you think, to all the panelists, this question? Do you think that a shift to, this is more a question for like Western issue, like Western, also like question for Germany maybe? For the migration, wouldn't be beneficial a bit of a shift to the right? Of course, Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, you don't like to hear that, but in the sense, a bit more conservative from the political perspective to steal the votes from AfD, and somehow to address your concern, speaking about migration in a different way, but still speaking about it and a bit harder about that. And from the Latvian perspective then, about social policy, maybe a solution about migration, but how is going the next European budget influencing the relationship among member states? How is going to be the next European budget? And is it going to be as rich as before?
Please.
Actually, go ahead.
If you look at Austria, for example, of course you can say that the Conservative Party there has, in the last general election campaign, they did, Sebastian Kurz, he did a far-right wing course on migration and won the elections. But I don't think that this will be sustainable in the long run, because I mean, we will always find some populists, and the same problem is now for Sebastian Kurz, who are far more right, the FPÖ in that case, who will say, okay, you're already now in that position, then we can go a step further. Because borders, and before that and that, and I mean, this is endless. And so I don't think this is sustainable, because if you want to have a European solution, you cannot close borders. And therefore, I, again, would look at France, because there Macron has shown that with a pro-European international campaign you can win elections as well. So this would be the opposite idea, to catch up people and say, okay, if there's, the alternative is Marine Le Pen, closing borders, having no migrants, then people will also vote for the more open-minded and for the more international program. So I don't think we have in Germany now the discussion, because AfD is in the Bundestag, you know the debate, the CSU in Bavaria is pushing to close this right corner, and well, I don't think you can find sustainable solutions there in this right corner, because AfD, the German Populist Party, will always be a step ahead in that direction.
Well, regarding the question on budget, nobody knows, of course, what the next budget is going to be like, but my hope is, and I think it's...
But it will be smaller.
It's going to be smaller, of course, without the UK, but my hope is that on a pro rata basis, that it's not going to decrease in real terms on a pro rata per inhabitant basis, despite the fact that the UK was a net contributor. That is my hope. Whether or not that will be a political reality, I don't know. I think many people are, especially in Latvia, have been too pessimistic about speculating about agricultural policy going down the drain and whatnot. I don't think it's going to happen. France is still France, and farmers there are still farmers. But it's a good question, and we'll see how that pans out. And that, of course, will impact the pace of integration. You can't integrate if you don't have money to integrate.
And I'd like to pick up one more country you were mentioning with these nice examples of election and pre-election game, is Netherlands. I think they played that very game you were referring to, that if you take at least part, let's say, more logical approach of these extreme parties, and you try to adjust your own policy, then you still like reserve your power in being re-elected again. So I think that might be one of the ideas. Actually, I even think that in Latvia it somehow happened already, even though we never had received these many migrants coming here. but I think also Latvian political parties adjusted their own opinion already so far. And by the way, we are talking in a day. Today, the Latvian government decided not to decide on a special list of urgently needed 300 something different professions where there is a lack of people who might really work for real companies in Latvia here. Because we'd like, you know, to add some Latvians in this, coming back, calling them back from UK, hoping that they will come, and you know, these
Total bullshit.
yeah, total mental bullshit. So that will never happen. Sorry.
But this is bullshit. This doesn't
Yeah, but this
work
will
like
never happen, because a Latvian who left for a better life to Great Britain or Ireland, no one asks from the local politicians here if they are really coming to come back if miracle happens, and they said no. So we are still living in this society when we don't want to face a real regulated migration, which is really a list of needed professions, at least in Latvian case. But blocking this very principle that is definitely needed for local economy to be prosperous enough. Blocking by emotional, you know, thing that, oh, look at how many Latvians went to UK and something like this. But this, unfortunately, reality. So just to say that it will influence the context.
We started the discussion with some personal feeling or from your life, what you've done as but also finish with that. What would be your personally ideal European Union for you?
Ideal European Union.
For me, an ideal European Union would mean that we would have some elements of some other federal countries where Latvians, for instance, could live in other parts of the European Union and still feel to be an integral part of what is happening in Latvia, also in a political sense, where there would be solidarity for social policies, where we would have a common formulas at minimum for protecting those that are least privileged in society, and where we would begin to feel solidarity also in the foreign policy and security areas in a more affirmative fashion.
For me the same, yeah. Solidarity and convergence, because this is written in the treaties as well. The convergence of the economies, step by step, not in one jump, of course, but the idea would be to boost this convergence. And I think we discussed many things tonight where we could do one small and tiny step, which is more than muddling through.
Would Turkey be in your ideal?
No. Difficult question. I think actually we need a phase in the moment for more integration and then for enlargement.
The answer is not yet.
Not yet ideal.
Even though Maris is not believing into this concept, I believe that I'd like to live in the European Union when we sincerely face discussion, actually in 1 year or 2 years, when we will start to, let's say, draft the next budget of EU of 6 years, that there will be less expenditure for agriculture and more for real I don't know,
research and development.
Research developments, things like these. Really, what is lacking, at least in my country here, was always like co-funded by European Union, and in many cases that was the only actually funding for these important things that really develops economy, not these social payments to French farmers and Latvian farmers and Greek farmers and so on, because I don't see this as a real investment, and at least I learned that the European money should work as investment money, as really boosting something. So far I sincerely would believe in Europe. It would be more directing this way. If it will happen, I don't know. I will question my politicians towards these questions.
I agree with you that European agriculture, in my view, policy should be too much, and it should change at least
Nevertheless, you are doing agriculture yourself in your lifetime.
Yeah.
We catched you!
I'm benefiting from this, but I understand that it's not a healthy system for different reasons. But that's another discussion, maybe next year. So thank you everybody for attending. Let's continue some chat over coffee and some snacks. I would like to ask speakers still to remain here. We'll have to record very short statements from you.